Hello there! Welcome back to Charles Circle, and welcome back to Captain of Industry. Last time, we leveraged our strong industrial foundation from episode 1 to invest in a bunch of valuable upgrades. We moved from iron onto steel, we upgraded our basic refinery to leverage distillation technology, and we upgraded our construction parts factory. Today, I think it's finally time to spin up a full and proper refinery. I've got a few other odds and ends, especially in the farming sector, that I think we should tackle too, but let's start out with the refinery. And in fact, let's actually start out with an oil power plant. So I think having an oil power plant as part of your refinery is a good idea in general, but it's definitely a good idea if you need to run down all of the excess heavy and light oil byproduct that you've pack ratted away, like I did. It'll be quite simple. We'll actually just, for starters, copy paste our existing coal power plant and make another one down here. Have to clean this up a little bit. What we're actually going to do instead of a coal boiler is using the control and scroll wheel, by the way, on the mouse. You can swap between different versions of buildings sometimes. We are going to bring in a gas boiler instead. And so what we'll do is place it here, like so. This boiler can then burn each of these different byproducts. We're only going to be using light oil and heavy oil here for now. We do produce medium oil here, but it immediately gets consumed in stage 2 of the distiller. These others we'll talk about later, but we aren't going to use quite yet. So, in order to do this, we will of course need to bring in some water. We'll create the same 48 steam that a coal boiler is capable of doing, and we're going to make some exhaust. Notably, these make more exhaust than the coal recipe does, and more exhaust than a single lowest tier smokestack is capable of doing. So something to keep in mind, an oil power plant is a little bit more polluty than you might otherwise be making. But that's no problem, we're happy to do it. That also means we're going to have to use a pipe 2 in order to get all of that out of here. Now, that's all precluded on the idea that this would actually be running 100% of the time. It probably won't be. We're not using that much power yet, but we're going to scale up in relatively short order, so we'd like to make sure that it's, future-proof. The other thing we're going to need is a balancer. Right here before the entrance to the boiler itself, because we'd like to be able to prioritize between the different byproducts here and burn whatever we have in excess at that time. So at first, right, we have much more of the light oil byproduct, and you'll notice that to produce the same amount of steam, we actually have to burn a higher overall volume of light oil. So we are going to prioritize that for now. The other reason we'll do that is there is, as soon as we have a cargo ship set up, a better use for heavy oil. We can use it as an alternate fuel to avoid spending diesel. No such thing exists for light oil. So in general, we're going to prioritize the burning of light oil, but we also do not want to be sitting on a ton of heavy oil, and we'd rather be burning that than coal. So we'll prioritize for now, but this will be a pretty active system where we bounce back and forth. The other thing we have to do, of course, is provide some water. We could bring it in manually, or we could just kind of come down this cliff face with a pipeline, which is, I think, what we're going to do. Might seem a little awkward. It's definitely not going to be aesthetic, but it will be functional, and there's a lot to be said for that. So let's just run a pipe out like this. Well, I guess it'll work. It's a little awkward, but it's fine. It will bring the water that we need. That's all we really can ask of it. So I think this same groundwater pump should be fine in order to provide all the water it needs for the current power plant, which is more or less what we're just going to be lifting and shifting. It's not even running at a full 50% of the time, so I think we'll be okay there. And this should bring everything down here that we need. I think what I might do is flip this around here. And since we already have a smokestack there, we can adjust to bring this in. And of course, we're going to need to actually connect up the steam here. And there we go. The last thing we're going to want to make sure to do is to put this on a higher production priority than we have the coal power plant on, because we want this to still run. We're going to leave this built, but we want it to run only if and when we don't have the oil byproducts. In order to burn this down first, we're going to prioritize this higher, but we do need coal as a backup. So I think we'll go ahead and let this, in fact, all get built, including the second set of high pressure turbines and power generators, which we have not yet done up here, because we're getting close to being full up on the 4 megawatts capacity that we had out this way. And I'd like to, since we have power supplies in excess, I'd like to supply power itself to the settlement itself. And the settlement ends up being, it's one of the things we can provide, like water and food. It ends up being a pretty decently sized consumer of power. So let's just go ahead and get out ahead of that. Speaking of the settlement, I think one of the things we talked about previously was we wanted to get a proper settlement water set up out here. So let's run more pipelines awkwardly down cliff faces. And let's go ahead and get a groundwater pump, I guess, roughly here should do. We'll go ahead and run a pipe out this way. So that'll supply water here, and then of course we'll need to take care of the wastewater, which I think we are going to... I like to pipe it directly out into the ocean here, but we are still sort of filling in this area. I think we're just gonna go over top of that. Should be okay. All right, so this will just take a little bit of construction parts to get built. You know, I was thinking about this. I realized after last episode, I made fun of myself for storing all of this, saying it was super inefficient, but I thought, actually, you know, it might be worth walking out why I think that. Not just to explain myself, but because I think it'll illustrate how I think about what makes a good investment in the game. Because we're gonna get value from these resources. It might be a little counterintuitive at first to say it's actually more efficient to waste them by lighting them on fire. It's the intersection of two things. First, the cost of the storage, and second, the timeline. So first, the cost. We're looking at, what, like 30 of these storages, and they each cost 30 construction parts 1. You know, call this roughly 1,000 construction parts 1 in cost. That, said another way, is the equivalent of, well, if it's 1,000 construction parts 1, it's 500 steel, 500 wood, and 750 concrete slabs. That's a decent amount of resources. Now we'll get back 80% of these when we delete these back down to clean it back up, but said another way, we've lit 20% of that on fire. And the 80% we get back is tied up here until we run these stockpiles down. And that brings us second to the timeline of these costs and benefits. While the primary value of these resources is clear, we're going to burn them for power, which will save us on coal that we'd otherwise be using. What have we actually gained so far, like right this minute? Well, instead of burning it off, right, we've been storing it, and burning it off is very bad for your health. So we've actually, you know, accumulated some health cost avoidance, so to speak. But, you know, health isn't completely useless, but as long as you've got above 0, the marginal health gain is pretty close to useless, frankly. So right now we've spent 1,000 construction parts for essentially no gain that we've realized so far. In the future, we'll get 800 construction parts back, and probably the equivalent of avoiding having to consume almost, I don't know, like 5k coal, something like that, which isn't terrible. It's not terrible at all. But while these benefits are going to start to trickle in here soon, they're going to take a lot of time to accumulate as we run these stockpiles down. So if you think about the net present value of future resources, so to speak, if I promised you $100 today or 1 year from now, you'd take it today, 10 times out of 10, right? Because you can put that $100 to work right away. We could have put those construction parts to work doing something else for our base. And we've paid the opportunity cost of, not being able to do the next best thing. Anyways, there's no wrong way to play. This is only marginally inefficient, and we're still very much able to accomplish what we want to right now. I just thought it might be helpful to walk through how I think about investment, because that thought process is basically how I decide what we should do next. Where should we allocate our investment resources, which is what construction parts are. They're our basic unit of investment and growth. Our base grows in capability, overall economic, value, through the capacity that we invest in building. So prioritizing those investments well is what helps us grow efficiently. So that's basically one of the lenses, at least, I use when I think about what should we build next. But yeah, so we're going to bring forward the benefit of all of this stockpile by burning through here once this is all built. I think we just need to let some time go by though, so I'll come back when it's done. All right, and a little while later, we have the whole thing up and running. So we are firing 100% of our power now through the gas power plant. This is over here, still functional, but as you can see, not really doing anything, which is exactly what we hoped it would be. So we are running all of our power through this gas boiler, running through this entire stockpile. And I also actually even connected up the steam over here so that we can run these machines on the gas boiler as well. Same concept as power, right? Anywhere that we can create steam from an oil byproduct instead of from coal, that's good. We're going to do that. So, yep, that's all set. I even, as you may or may not be able to tell, took a second pass at a slightly more aesthetic pipe descent through the cliff face. I don't know. I just don't think there's a good way to do it. So be it. We also got the new and improved water facility up and running. This no longer requires any truck interaction whatsoever, which is great. I will say it drives me nuts. You can flip the orientation of the settlement water, but then you go back to the settlement itself and it's always the same orientation. You actually can't flip it in place, which is annoying because I would love to have this the other direction because we wouldn't have to do this awkward pipe crossover stuff. Tiny aesthetic complaints. Hard to be too upset. Anyway, the other thing I think I just saw was that the settlement power technology just popped, so let's throw a transformer in here as well. Go ahead and get that built as soon as we can, and we can delete this old building now, which should give us some of the parts too that we're going to need to make that construction work. The next thing I think we should probably do, as much as I'd love to get into the proper refinery upgrade itself, I think one of the things I'm realizing as we try to build things is we are not generating the construction parts as quickly as we want, and that's mostly we're actually steel limited already, which unbelievable and yet also completely believable. This is not the last time that that's going to happen. That is part and parcel of a steel economy. So I'm going to double this up. As we mentioned, this should fit nice and tidy in here. We even have another slot for the second air separator. I'm just going to dive on in and get this going already. All right, I think this should work. Good amount of connecting stuff up here at the edges. I think it's relatively smooth though. I think things worth calling out, because we are going up over 60 iron ore required now that we have more than 2 machines, we have 4. We need to get at least these 2 segments upgraded to conveyor 2s, right? So we have this upgraded belt 2 now. It does take construction parts 3, which is why I'm going to be at least early on, pretty judicious about where we use them. I'm not going to use them unless we need to. In the longer run, we'll have plenty of parts 3 and we'll just use them everywhere on these sort of shared distribution belts, but we're going to be slow and steady right now. The same is true with pipes 2, although pipes 2 do not require parts 3, they are only parts 2, as you can see here. But same general thought, let's be a little bit judicious and use them where we need them and don't where we don't. Only other thing I'll say, the blueprint did not make this super easy to connect the water up here. I actually had to move it out another layer, so apologies for that. Don't think I thought through that part. I guess it'll involve a slight bit of pipe rework if you want to extend it out this way. So be it. We're also going to run a water pipeline out here so we don't have to do this manually so much. So it's a very temporary concern in the first place, but I think all good. The other thing we should probably get doing is we have some pretty bright red food warnings, and we should do something about that. So we're producing, let's just check in here, probably not quite enough compared to what we need. Demand is 19 and 9.7. I wonder if that's, I think that reflects the fact that we are also not providing in this moment any vegetables. I think we're all out. Yeah. At any rate, the point is we definitely need more food. So let's go ahead and upgrade these farms. We'll do a little bit more with the farms in a bit, but we're going to start here. So irrigated farms are an upgrade to the normal farm. They actually allow you to manually supply water. Normally, the previous farm simply relied on rain, and you get some bonus rain in the first 10 years, but that's not enough in the longer run. So we're going to get ourselves a bit of a piping system, irrigation system out this way as well. So I'm also toggling back and forth here, burning whatever we are most full on. I have a little alert letting me know when the back row ever gets full. We'll sort of swap back and forth. We are running these down over time, which is kind of nice. Well, we got a little dodgy on the food there for a second, but I did manage to get us upgraded to irrigated farms, got another one in here, and we're all connected up to water. So I think this is going to dig us up out. The good news is that the food consumption edict and the farm yield edict are both there for you in this sort of a situation, and we made good use of them. So that continues to trend upward. I think we're in a good spot there. The bad news, of course, is that meant, oops, everything's on fire. You need to pause your optional construction stuff. So we need to get the steel setup going again. I did end up, here. I did end up taking a couple decent loans. The biggest one is a huge steel one that we are absolutely going to need to pay back down, but it was basically keeping us from being able to make all the construction parts. That was our catch-22 of being able to get out of literally all of this stuff, because you have to build your way out with capacity. So remember, loans are there for you. And yeah, I think we're in an okay spot here. We've got irrigated farms sorted. In a moment, we'll talk about tree planting. I just don't want to take away farming capacity, but I think we're going to start growing our own trees over here. We still have, of course, plenty of trees in the area. I'm actually prioritizing clearing so we can drop down a fourth farm just in case we need it. We've got all of this out here, so we don't need to do this yet, but I think it'd be good to spin it up just to show how it works and so that we have it. It does take a while to grow, so it's something you want to get set up before you absolutely need it. So we'll get that going, but I think before anything else happens, we really have to make sure that our steel capacity is better than it currently is. So we'll come back in a moment once this is all built out. Along the way, though, we do need more housing, and I think we're finally ready, now that we've supplied power, to upgrade to housing 2. That'll give us a bit of a Unity combo bonus, as I think we mentioned in the last episode. So it's time to start growing up, not just out. Very good stuff. The other thing we can do along the way, we are, as we rip through all the construction parts, spending more concrete slabs. But we got the Concrete Mixer 2 upgrade somewhere along the way here, now that we have construction parts 3. And by somewhere along the way, I mean, I think that's the exact tech where that comes in, is, yep, construction parts 3. You get the concrete mixer 2 as well. So this is simply an upgrade in place. It'll take twice as many materials and spit out twice as many slabs. Start by just doing one here, but we'll probably do the other in relatively short order as well. All right, steel factory officially doubled up. Now we have to see if the mining capacity can keep up. I'm cautiously optimistic, but it's a lot of trucks bringing over a lot of little loads into a tiny storage. Keep an eye on it. So far so good though. Everybody's operating at 100% unless they are still spinning up, but even the ones that are doing well so far. Okay, we have our first housing 2 as well, which is lovely. I've turned the beacon back on. We'll be able to fill this worker shortage here in short order. We can go grab at least 10 of them like this, but we don't have reputation. Village reputation, again, as a reminder, is what is required in order to adopt them. We only have the starter village starter reputation of 1. We haven't invested in that any further, so we will have to do that if we want to be able to adopt more pops. We can always just run the beacon in the meanwhile, though, so that'll work. Hey, so our single maintenance depot basic is currently making the 220 maintenance that it is capable of making, and that's not enough. We're starting to tick down here. In the short term, we could just boost this, double the throughput, but we also just got the maintenance depot proper technology. So we are going to simply upgrade in place right here. And you'll be able to see, although we don't have the recipe yet, you'll be able to see that just like there is on the research lab, there is an output here for recyclables, and they're all lined up. So we will, once we have that tech, shoot them all out probably to this side somewhere. Don't know exactly what we'll do with it, but that is going to happen. Hey, by the way, did you see a massive drop here all of a sudden? The thing about this statistic is that it tells you how much you have of the buffer. And the buffer is a function of how many machines you have right here. So it looks very spooky all of a sudden. Our machine itself just doubled in throughput and therefore in storage buffer size. And so the proportion, the absolute amount of maintenance that we had built up, suddenly was no longer the 70% or whatever it was of the smaller cap. So don't get spooked. This will happen every time you build a new machine or upgrade it. It'll look scary, the percent, but that's because the total size of your buffer just changed. What's going on here that we're not supplying sufficient steam? Is that because this is also taking steam now? We could boost this just to be safe, although that will mean that we'll need to improve our water throughput here probably. Let's get a second groundwater pump going here, at least. The issue is that 48 is not actually a full pipe, but 2 of them is, right? So we're gonna have to do this at least, and I would like to do all of this. But even just getting 60 through here will help this run faster, if not at perfect capacity. Troubleshoot it more later. But I think this is fine for now. I think the other thing we're going to do, now that the iron ore is only going to this single spot, is shorten that trip. Right now, it's not the end of the world, but our trucks go here and then here. We could simply actually just have them go over here, and in fact change which part of the mine they're actually working on. And that would, I think, speed up some of the work. I don't want to do we want to have the coal work through here as well? I like having coal have its own, but a lot of it is going here. Let's just do this. Let's do this for now. We'll take this out, no sand, but coal is fine, but we're going to leave coal to have that one as well. What we'll say is, using, by the way, these export routes that we've unlocked, I'll say that if you work for this mine tower, you may drop off here, 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 or here. Those are all valid locations to drop your coal. Out here, though, we want to make sure that the iron mine tower also has that as an export. So here and here. So let's get this built. And hopefully that should shave off, you know, a small amount, but on a lot of trips. Look how many trucks are doing this, right? So hopefully that should help out our truck network a bit. The other thing I want to do, I have a new excavator. We are starting to be bottlenecked by our production of concrete slabs, and that is because we're not really making much in the way of rock. Again, very good problem to have, that we have a bunch of pure mines, but we also can just like mine some rock directly. So I think what we'll do, put ourselves a nice little tower here, and tell this tower, you know what, just go ahead and clear all this space out, because we're going to want it in the longer run to expand in this area. So we might as well. Give you an excavator, pair of pickups, no dumping anything here. And it'll need an ore sorter out here as well, I suppose. So I guess we'll need to get one placed for him too. But it really should just be rock and dirt. And the only reason I'm not just saying dump everything, you know, is that we need to separate the rock out for our concrete, and we want to make sure that we're saving our dirt for this very important beautification project on the shoreline. So we'll go ahead and build this as well. We also continue to make good progress out here. Go ahead and swap over here to the heavy oil for a bit. We've clearly chunked out quite a few of these. So I think what I'm going to do is actually say no output from here onward. Everything should back up here, and then we'll run through all of this. We'll be able to delete all of these. Thinking in the longer run, these ideally are the two only remaining storages, these first couple. So we'll chip our way back from the front, if that makes sense. And so our new maintenance depot is working, but not at top speed. It does seem, in order for this to run a little bit higher and faster, we are going to need to go ahead and get this extra assembly up another level. So this makes sense. As we said, we'll keep doing that in this direction, I'm sure, over the course of the game here. We need to make this the iron recipe, or the steel recipe now instead. That's why we have to upgrade in the first place. But now that we have, let's go ahead and flip this belt back in the right direction, along with that one. One thought, and then it'll actually dovetail nicely, I think, into the ship upgrades that we're currently getting right now, by the way. I've had some people ask, can you really move 100% off of iron? And the answer is yes. So by bulk volume, a huge fraction of what you're going to use iron for in any playthrough is construction parts 1 and mechanical parts. That takes care of just about all of it. There are a few edge cases. So retaining walls, if you like to build retaining walls, I believe, yes, they cost a small but meaningful amount of iron in the longer run. And the ship upgrades that we're about to get, we're going to wait until we have the armor to actually do both of them. But out here in the ship designer, this is where you upgrade your ship, you'll see that as we select the guns, we'll come back and do armor before we press go. This also requires iron. Now, we still have some in here built up from when we cleared that all out, but what do you do if you need more? There's a quick trade. Steel for iron. And you might remember that I said from terms of iron ore, steel is essentially 2 iron. It compresses down in the steel production process, right? If you'll recall, the molten iron down into molten steel is a 2-to-1 compression. But even considering that, if you call this 80 iron ore, you're getting back a product that is 100 iron ore. So this is actually a pretty efficient way to get iron. There's more to steel than just the iron input, of course, right? There's all the power and the water. But this is like not an expensive quick trade is the point. So we're definitely going to be able to do this anytime we need iron. So that should cover you, really. There's no other meaningful source of iron that consumption that I can think of. And Yeah, I've removed it entirely in playthroughs before, and I'm pretty sure that's what we did in the Update 3 playthrough as well. So it is very doable. You just will have to scale up, as we've already seen, your steel production pretty quickly. That's your one trade-off, but it's not so bad. All right, so with both of these upgrades, we are now able to go into the ship designer, and we are going to give ourselves armor in both slots, guns in both the front and the rear, and we are going to give ourselves a full-on battle score of 190. So we'll go ahead and let this get going. As you see, our built-up 475 or whatever is not going to quite do us, so we will have to go in and let's use that quick trade. In fact, let's go get 200 of it. Every time you do 2 quick trades or more, it gets more expensive until this sort of timer burns off. So we'll wait, because it takes a minute also to spin up the actual upgrade itself. So we'll come back and do that, but that'll allow us to get back out onto the world map. Of course, it'll take a larger crew post-upgrade, and we don't have the workers for that, so it looks like it's time for another housing to upgrade. Alright, yeah, so one other spot that it's worth calling out that you still need iron is in the creation of small excavators and tree harvesters. You need some in the vehicle depot still for a bit. But we'll be moving on up to better vehicles in relatively short order, and those are all steel and or construction parts, vehicle parts too, which is steel. Alright, I think we've made enough of a chunk difference here that it's going to be fun to go ahead and clear out this entire row. And I think that even to here is good to do. We'll run this pipe out through here inevitably when we do back up, but that's a good chunk of dopamine to clear all this out. And should probably help with all of the construction parts loans we've taken. I think that'll allow us to pay everything off, or at least the parts one. So very good. All right, and brilliant. So with that many workers around, we can now load up our fully upgraded, not fully upgraded, but full of the first 2 upgrades ship. And now that we have guns, we can actually fight. I feel like we should christen her the maybe she's the Pittsburgh Pirate after the baseball team. All right, let's get out there. So we have a combat rating of 190, which means we can take on a bunch of these ships. 70, 70, 170, 170. We can do pretty much all of these. Great. So it'll be nice to get back out on the world map and chipping away, exploring, finding new stuff, finding some goodies. Happy to have it. Other thing I mentioned we wanted to get done, and I think we're ready to do now, is a pipeline over here for water supply out to steel. So we're gonna stop bringing stuff out and just let this pump directly across the map. It's a chunk of construction parts we can now definitely afford, and it's not so much maintenance in this particular chunk. We'll be just fine, I think. Our first battle where we're actually capable. That's toast. Absolutely crushed the scout ship. We've got another cargo ship. Other odds and ends that I've mentioned a couple times that we should finally get around to taking care of. This construction parts factory is still bottlenecked on belt 1s in a couple spots, really on the concrete slab input and the construction part output, because this is a 60 belt and there's 4 of these machines. Anywhere above 15, we're going to need to upgrade. Fortunately, that's just a couple spots here. So let's, using the I tool, the upgrade tool, by the way, toggled with I, we can go ahead and get those belts all sorted. I'm also going to be less judicious now that we have some more breathing room on the construction parts. I'm going to go ahead and use it. We don't need it here, for example. We probably don't need it here. It's just in the early spots. I don't care. We're going to start using it on full circulation belts. And by start, I'm actually probably overstating because I realized after we already did it, we technically didn't need it on the coal line out here. Doesn't matter. All good. Oh, we should get rid of that slag. I think that probably means we need more, dumping zone. So out here, I think we're going to extend this out into the ocean a bit more. Sort of running out of room otherwise. But yeah, so this will be good to have sorted out here. It'll take us a few construction parts 3, but we have them. The other thing we should probably get to, speaking of things I've been putting off, let's get some forestry going out here. What do we need to do that? Well, it starts with a forestry control tower. It's not dissimilar to a mine control tower in some ways. We'll need to go get a tree planter built, and we can, but do not have to, assign some tree harvesters to this area specifically. What we'll do is say, all right, everything in, call it this area, is managed by this tower, and we will say that in all of this zone, the tower should direct the placement of new trees. And this will allow us to sustainably grow our own trees anywhere that is on top of dirt. It has to be fertile ground, which, by the way, I'm now kind of forgetting if I ever even mentioned is a requirement for farming. Just in case, it has to be built on dirt, can't be built on rock. We don't have too much exposed rock to actually show that off, but it has to actually be on dirt in order to be farmable. Something to keep in mind. Speaking of farms, though, the other thing we'll need are saplings. Saplings are what gets put into the ground by this tree planter. So we'll go ahead and get one of him made, and we're probably going to want to put a little storage of saplings out here. Keep full. Get her built. We did also unlock bigger storages along the way. I'm going to also judiciously here start upgrading particular outputs. I'm not going to do all of this, for example, but anywhere where we have like a high volume output that we want to make sure we don't waste time on, I think we'll use. So like, for example, here, this is not a problem because we use it so fast, but in general, I'd like to have that eventually sorted out. Probably here. This will be a good one. So when we go through these, we go through them quickly. And why not electronics as well, right? Big outputs, big inputs. I don't like storing things for the sake of storing things. What you're really doing is incurring an inventory cost. You're holding all of this stuff. So you'd rather not have to make things that you aren't using, if that makes sense. Like, it's that simple. But yeah, so we'll start to do that here. And we'll definitely make use of those when we build our big new refinery, which I promise is the next thing. It took us long enough to get there, but we have all of the requirements finally in place. We're pretty much caught up on all of the oops, we had to do all this stuff, almost, just about. And we'll be ready to dive in and place it here shortly. Get excited. Damn it, I built a tree harvester instead of a tree planter, didn't I? Oops. Hey, we just won a battle that helped us discover the world sulfur mine. That is good to know where that is, and it's not far either, which is lovely. And a little while later, with the right vehicle built, we have some tree saplings that are all being placed in the ground. So, as we said, this will take some time for them to grow and fill in, so it's very good that we have all these remaining trees on the island, but we're happy we have it going. You can also, by the way, trade off how long it takes. You can do this faster, you can harvest faster, but it comes at the expense of the actual amount of wood that you get per harvest, and it costs more saplings to regenerate. So again, because we have the luxury of having gotten this going at a reasonable hour, we will let these grow slowly but efficiently and work on cutting down the rest of the trees on the island before we have to start moving into this type of wood sourcing. Okay, a little while later, we're stuffed to the gills with construction parts and their various input ingredients, so we are ready for a sizable build, which means it's refinery time. Let's hop over to our sandbox world to see how it's supposed to work. Alright, so over here in the blueprint world, let's place our starter refinery blueprint and walk through it quickly. With one exception, You've seen all of these buildings before, so hopefully it's not too overwhelming. So, high level, as usual, we have all of our inputs and output storages here on what we'll call the road front or storefront end of the facility. Out this way is where we're going to generate all of the steam we need to power all of these modules. These distillation stage 1 and 2 modules should look familiar to you. We have a pair of them now, mirrored over this center line. And then this right here, the sour water stripper, is our new building. We unlocked this tech relatively recently, and it was one of the key ones that I wanted to make sure that we had in place before we actually committed to a larger refinery build. This will finally allow us to process and dispose of sour water instead of dumping it with a lot of pollution into the ocean. So like the other distillation buildings, it requires a little bit of steam to run, but it takes that sour water and it turns it into sulfur and ammonia, resources we haven't yet seen, and water. So it mostly recycles by volume all this water, but the sulfur and ammonia byproducts we are going to have to either deal with or find a productive use for. Ideally, it's find a productive use for, because deal with here just means lighting on fire, and that's the whole pollution thing that we are trying to avoid, or at least minimize. But these become very valuable to us over time. It's capable in one building of processing 36, which is super convenient because we make 18 sour water per distillation stage 1 building. So that means that these two modules perfectly fit the sour water stripper. The other thing that's super neat about this particular set of ratios is, if you recall, every time this is true in a coal boiler or in a gas boiler, but every time we burn something to make steam, we take water to do it. And it's 1-to-1. So for every steam we have to generate, we take 1 water. But let's count up all the steam real quick. These take 3 plus 6 is 9. So 9 for these two, doubled, is 18. Plus 3 more is 21 steam. And we get back 21 water. So that actually makes, as it's written right now, this entire setup net 0 water. So we're going to have to bring over a little bit to jumpstart it, but we actually don't need to connect this to a water reservoir or to be continuously bringing in water via truck, which is awesome. Now eventually there is a distillation stage 3 building, which is good, and we're excited when we get it, and we'll slap it right down here on the end, 3rd building in a row. But that also takes some steam, and that does mean then we do have to bring in a little bit of water, but that's in the future, and we'll be happy to pay that price when we can add that step, because it'll allow us to get something even better out of light oil. So we're going to get this thing jump started, and then I'll walk you through it, because I think it's easier to understand when you see it in motion. So in order to do this, as I mentioned, we will need a little bit of water to start. We'll also need a little bit of light oil. This thing runs on light oil and or heavy oil as a byproduct. You can decide which one you want to prioritize, but I typically prioritize light oil in this situation because we'll start using heavy oil for cargo ships shortly. But whichever you prefer. There should be plenty of either in order to run this thing once it gets going, but we'll need to jumpstart it. In Blueprint World, I can just create these convenient little sources, so we're going to quickly pipe these together temporarily and let them provide a little bit of starting supply. Once this gets up to roughly halfway or so, we'll just cut this off. Same thing here. As you can see, the oil, which starts here, then moves into, on the very ground floor, you can see the, hard to click on it properly, this bottom floor pipe. This is our oil. So these each take 60 per minute. So that has to be a Mark II pipe, and this is 120 total. It takes the steam. Let's go ahead and pause both of these before I forget. This takes the steam, as we know. It turns the outputs into the medium oil, which is immediately consumed. It also creates the heavy oil and sour water. Over here, we take that medium oil, more steam, we spit out diesel and light oil. So let's trace these outputs. Steam, as we mentioned, comes in here. I usually do keep steam on the top row. The sour water, we're sending all the way up to level 4. and it comes out here to the sour water stripper. On level 3, we have our light oil output, and you can trace that all the way around here. Diesel on level 2 comes out of both of these end stage buildings, and the heavy oil from the stage 1 comes all the way around here on level 1. Level 0, or the ground floor, is the return for the water. It comes all the way back out here. And as you'll see, we've been running this for a moment now. It'll drift up and down, but it nets 0. It's pretty cool. I've left essentially the jump start instructions for a truck in here, but you should not have to bring anything else in. So all of these sort of meet up from each of these modules, and they flow around in this direction. Let's start with the sour water because it's simplest and it brings us to our favorite new building. So, as we said, this should run perfectly at 100%, and it does, and it spits out sulfur, ammonia, and water. As we said, the water goes right back around. The ammonia and sulfur come out along this belt and pipe, respectively. We'll touch on that set of processes in a moment. The heavy and light oil do a series of different things conditionally. And in fact, maybe it's simplest to start with the diesel. Diesel right here, nope, hard to see it, there it is. We are able to prioritize between two different directions. One, right here, I'm currently keeping this to drain so that the whole thing stays on, but it will back up and the whole thing will stop once it does. But the other thing that it can do, and you can choose to prioritize this however you'd like, is come over here to the rubber maker. One of the things we can do with sulfur is, instead of having to bring in coal and create this wastewater, we can create the same ratio, but a higher throughput, diesel into rubber, which is great. Since this sulfur is we need to dispose of it type byproduct anyway, we might as well. So we're going to do that here, and our rubber will be exportable out to the rest of the base. So let's trace light oil then. So light oil comes in here, and I currently have it set up to prioritize out this direction because this is storage of last resort, and then anything over and above, in case it would get full and would cap, we burn off. And for light oil specifically, because of the high volume we produce, we actually do need both of these flares in order to be able to burn off all excess. Although, of course, we can do the same for heavy oil. We only need the one. The same will eventually be true of ammonia, although it takes another minute to catch up by volume. But the preference would be to find a productive use for this light oil. In order to do that, we follow this pipe down here. And this pipe feeds into this balancer, which looks extremely superfluous for the moment, because it only has one output, which is prioritized. What gives? Well, we'll come back to that in a moment, but the one output it does have is into a similar balancer to how we currently have our oil power plant set up. It's able to accept either heavy or light oil here and here. Heavy does a lot of the same that we say with light, but it's down 2 levels. Right now, as I mentioned, I have light prioritized, but either of these is functional. Over here, we're burning it in order to run the steam that we need for this entire plant. This is set up so that we can have a second output. It's not part of the blueprint, but so that we can run this over to our oil power plant. We do want to be able to continue to use that excess for power instead of having to light it on fire. But I don't want that to be part of the blueprint here necessarily, because you may or may not use that in the future, but that's what this set of outputs here is for. That's sort of any other use you might use, but I have in mind the oil power plant. That structure is mirrored pretty much exactly with the heavy oil right here. Again, it is prioritized out this direction. It is provided if necessary or desired for the steam generation, but it's also here as an output to go over in that direction for the use in any sort of oil power plant that you might have. This is also set so that we can take it and send it out in case we want our cargo ships to run on it instead of diesel. The other thing we should do is show you these aren't constantly going to be burning. This is just set to keep this empty so that we can see it constantly in motion. Diesel is the thing that will set this whole thing to go idle. So in the non-blueprint, non-sandbox world, rather, once this gets full, the whole thing shuts off. So keep that in mind, especially if you're using these byproducts for power, right? You're only going to be continuously generating them if you're continuously generating diesel. It's easy enough. We just clear it back out, the whole thing kicks back in. But something, again, to keep in mind, because power is can be a spiky, you don't want your power supply to be spiky, rather, and the generation of these can be. The last thing to walk through, I think, in a little bit more detail is the logic on the sulfur disposal. There's two sequential balancers here. The first is, well, above all else, we want to make sure that our rubber maker has enough for it. The next is, we'd rather put into storage for the rest of the base, any excess sulfur beyond that. We'll talk about some uses for sulfur soon. We don't have any literally this second, but we have some in the pretty near future. And then finally, worst case scenario, we can burn it off. This is the same as a flare, a burner is, but it's for disposing of solid goods, essentially. You can do this with trash too. So that's the overall layout and walkthrough. And it works pretty much indefinitely. In fact, this one's been running the entire time in the background, and you'll see we're at 100% uptime for all of these, really. And again, it requires oil as an input, but that's it. The water is net zero. And then this whole thing powers itself and also access to an oil power plant. So let's wrap it up here and take it over and install it in our normal world. All right, so back in our main world, let's think about placement. So first thing we should do, just hover around. I want to give us plenty of room because we're not going to delete this before we build. That is something I generally suggest, especially for critical supply materials like diesel. Don't knock over the existing build until the new one is completed and ideally also tested. So we'll come out this way slightly, maybe even tuck it all the way over here. And there we go. This will give us plenty of room to navigate around. We're gonna have to run some pipes from our oil in and probably out to our power plant. So good to give ourselves more room rather than less. We're also gonna wanna consider an oil cargo depot because we're gonna bring in a lot of this over time from the world map. And I believe, there we go. Just a little bit of pixel hunt. We should be able to fit a pretty sizable dock, at least for this point in the game, right here. So we'll need to make a few connections before we start building everything. We need to connect this up to our oil in, as well as this. I think ideally we'll prioritize the input from our existing ground supply. And we'll need to, as I mentioned during the walkthrough earlier, we'll need to connect out these outputs out this way so that we're burning anything we do have for power. I think I'll just dive in and do some of that pipe work in a little bit of a time lapse here. So I'll see you in a moment. All right, so I think that should do it. We'll have the crude oil come in here. These larger, well, I guess they're medium-sized fluid modules should have plenty of storage across these 4, and this storage here. And we'll let that come in to this balancer, which is going to prioritize a pipe whose aesthetic shape I hate, but really couldn't find anything better for. That is the output to the locally pumped crude storage. Longer run, we do have some more crude that we will gather from our island eventually. Maybe by pipeline, it's not so far. Maybe by train, that might be fun. Maybe by train from other islands eventually. So we'll definitely want to be able to also incorporate that here. So I think this balancer will live for a while, even if this specific pipe connection maybe does not. But that's the input. On the output side, I did end up connecting and in fact prioritizing a heavy oil output here to refuel the cargo ship. Once it's built, we'll have to swap this off diesel and onto heavy, but that's no problem. And then, as we mentioned, our light and heavy come out here and also join up with the existing lines going into our power plant. The nice thing about this too, even if this ends up running 100% of the time, we can stop boosting it because this won't be necessary anymore once we clear out this old unit. So that'll be nice. One other thought, these only produce 60 a minute. So we'll either have to make some more, or let's even see if we end up running above 50% right now. This is supposed to be a bit future-proof. I doubt we run 100%, all the time right away. If we end up doing that, though, we will have the ability to expand these modules. One thing I didn't call out when we were walking through, there's room to expand in this direction a couple times, especially if we round out this coastline. And there's the infrastructure in place to add a second one of these guys, one of these sour water strippers right here, room out in this direction to add 3 and 4 if we need to, so on and so forth. Rubber maker as well. So we're going to leave a lot of room back here, especially once this is cleared out. We'll be able to grow this as our base's needs grow, but I think this should be good for now. So I guess it's time to let all this get going. We'll instant build the 2 ramps so our trucks can actually still get back here and everything. But other than this, it's just going to take some time. We have some materials. It probably won't be everything. If I were to guess, yeah. Not quite, although that's a pretty good chunk. So we'll let them get going. The other thing we should probably do, we need a cargo ship. We don't have one yet, as far as I can remember. Here's some more iron required. We'll get that going. And then we'll also need to get the oil rig itself repaired. So we will, I think, start with the ship and then the oil rig. We'll let our various vehicles bring our various materials to our various locations, but we'll let them get after it, and I'll speed things up and skip ahead for you. See ya in a moment once we have something to report. All right, we have enough to get the damaged cargo ship repaired, so let's set that in motion, and we'll start loading up the construction parts too for the oil rig. We're coming along over here, not quite done, but doing pretty well. Had to clear a bit of a path over here. Push this all the way up against the edge and then no one could get back here, but we seem to be making our way through. All right, so let's switch our cargo ship over to use heavy oil. So we'll select it from the drop down. We do have to press this sort of reset button and it will leave and then come back, but I think it needs to fuel up on diesel in order to leave and come back. Anyway, we'll also reduce the ship speed and save on fuel. I don't think throughput's going to be a huge issue for us here, so we'd rather be efficient. I think that should be the last bit of the build. So once we have some water coming in, brilliant. Yeah, and it looks like things are starting to be up and running. There we go. Diesel being produced. Brilliant. So let's start just by pausing all of these. We will come back and actually delete and turn all of this off once we're super convinced everything is set. And I think, there we go. We should be able now to go fix that oil rig. It's going to take a lot of pops though. The world mines are very expensive to run in terms of staffing and also Unity cost. Something to keep in mind. We'll be happy to do it. But we have a little bit of a goal set to achieve here. So we have to run it, even if we do prefer to run off this in the short term. So more pops meant more housing too. We are cruising along here on adding pops. We are not quite at 1,000 yet, but we are going to be there in relatively short order. All right, I think I am convinced we can clear out some of this stuff. I think all of this can go. We don't need actually this liquid dump anymore, which is great because we aren't dumping sour water anymore. We can clear out these machines. We'll keep this storage probably. Let's get all of this stuff we're certain about out of the way first. All right, the oil rig is repaired. Now we unpause it and it should start producing 60 a minute as well. As I mentioned, it takes 36 workers, a pretty decent chunk of maintenance, and a good chunk of Unity as well. We can, fortunately, upgrade this if we want, improve the throughput. This million oil should last us a few years at our current rate. It'll last us quite some time. I don't think I've played past year 1000 on the channel yet, so it'll definitely last a while. We'll definitely also need more than we're currently burning. Good news though, we have found a couple other ones in the area. There's this one here, and I guess that's the only one so far, but we will find more out here for sure. So once that's going, once there's enough to pick up, this cargo ship will head on out there, grab hopefully at least 200, and come on back, and then we'll be good to go. Right now, I have these fellas going on double time in order to supply the full 160, or 120 rather, per minute that we can consume. It doesn't really seem necessary, does it? I think they're operating at, well, this guy's at 100%, 75, 74. So we can save on at least one. Very good though. I'm also, once these all finish burning down here, I'm also going to make this a simpler drop off rather than running through all of this nonsense. So this should be tidier in a moment as well, but we will burn through the last bit of this set of power. I think we can stop accumulating pops for now, but we are very nearly done spinning this up. Exciting stuff. And here we are. Our little cargo ship is on his way back with our first shipment of oil. Sent him a little early. I didn't really feel like waiting all that long, but we have enough to trigger the final step of this goal. And all right, there we go. All set. Very good. And this has now been running for quite some time with no problems. We are starting, of course, to fill up on the sulfur and ammonia here. You know, we'll have to do something with those in order to avoid burning them, but we will if we have to. This deposit is getting lower and lower, but we finally have our backfill, and I think we're pretty much set. I've cleaned up a little bit out this way as well. We still have a little bit of excess heavy oil. That's fine. We'll burn it if and when we need to, but it's also set to allow if we need to go refuel a ship for us to be able to do that as well. So yeah, I think this is it. I think the refinery is officially up and running. Good to go. One last thing before we call it a day here. Earlier, we upgraded our concrete mixer to the Concrete Mixer 2, doubling its throughput. I also, off camera, I think, got the second one upgraded. And that's all well and good. We continue to be able to supply, I think, enough water and sand, but did not think to add the corresponding second kiln and crusher required, respectively, for the cement and crushed input ingredients. So I'm going to do that real quick before we sign off. That should do it. Hopefully that helps to backfill some of this quickly. Our water reservoir is not doing so hot there, but we got a tech just now that I think is going to help with that next time. Maybe two, but we'll come back to that then. That's going to do it for today though. As usual, blueprints from today's episode are available in our Discord linked below. Although I guess there's just the one today, the Starter Refinery, which feels odd. We got a lot done today in addition to the refinery. It was just a bunch of little things, right? The settlement got power and housing 2 upgrades and got a better setup for water. And we got irrigated farms set up along with forestry, which is coming in nicely, by the way. We upgraded our ship and got it out onto the world map again. Oh, and we casually doubled our steel and concrete production. Not bad for a day's work. Let me know what you think about the refinery as well. Refineries can be a tough build. As with many things in Captain of Industry, the step up in efficiency comes with a step up in complexity. Lots of pipes, balancing, conditional logic, and byproduct nonsense. So I hope this was helpful, and as always, feedback is very welcome. I had fun today though. I hope you did too. If you did, be sure to stop by again for the next one. I think it might be time for our first trains. Until then though, have a great rest of your day, and bye-bye.